One woman's prayer turned her pain into purpose, leading to the birth of a prophet who changed history. This is the story of Hannah's faith and God's answer. Hannah's journey from sorrow to joy reminds us that even in our darkest moments, God hears our prayers. Let's walk through this powerful narrative step by step, diving into the emotions, challenges, and triumphs of a woman who trusted God wholeheartedly. Our story begins in the town of Ramah, where a man named Elkanah lived. Elkanah was a devout man who followed the Lord and had two wives, Hannah and Peninnah. While Peninnah had children, Hannah was barren. In ancient Israel, being unable to bear children was a source of deep shame and sorrow. A woman's worth was often tied to her ability to produce heirs, and Hannah felt the weight of this burden. Adding to her pain, Peninnah constantly mocked and provoked her. Peninnah's taunts weren't casual remarks, they were cruel and relentless, intended to remind Hannah of what she lacked. This caused Hannah deep emotional pain, and she often wept bitterly. Despite her suffering, Elkanah loved Hannah dearly. He tried to comfort her, saying, "Why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" While his words were meant to console, they didn't fully address the ache in Hannah's heart. She longed for a child, and nothing else could fill that void. Every year, Elkanah and his family traveled to Shiloh to worship and sacrifice to the Lord at the tabernacle. During one of these visits, Hannah's grief overwhelmed her. She slipped away from the festivities and entered the tabernacle to pray. Hannah poured out her heart before God. In her anguish, she made a vow, saying, "Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head." This vow was significant. By promising to dedicate her child to God, Hannah was committing to the Nazirite lifestyle for him, a life set apart for God's service. Her prayer was raw, honest, and deeply personal. As Hannah prayed, she was so consumed by her emotions that her lips moved silently. This unusual behavior caught the attention of Eli, the priest, who was sitting nearby. He misunderstood her actions and assumed she was drunk. Eli confronted her, saying, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine." Hannah respectfully explained, "Not so, my lord. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer, I was pouring out my soul to the Lord." Seeing her sincerity, Eli blessed her and said, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." Hannah left the tabernacle with a renewed sense of hope. She trusted that God had heard her prayer, and her sorrow began to lift. In due time, God answered Hannah's heartfelt prayer. She conceived and gave birth to a son. Filled with joy and gratitude, she named him Samuel, which means, heard by God, acknowledging that her prayers had been answered. Hannah's story could have ended here with her rejoicing over her son, but her faithfulness went deeper. She had made a vow to dedicate Samuel to the Lord, and she intended to keep it. When Samuel was old enough to be weaned, Hannah prepared to fulfill her promise. This was no small act. In ancient culture, weaning often occurred when a child was around 3 years old. For a mother to part with her young child would have been heart-wrenching. Yet Hannah's trust in God gave her the strength to follow through. She brought Samuel to the tabernacle in Shiloh and presented him to Eli. With a grateful heart, she said, "I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." Hannah didn't stop at fulfilling her vow, she also offered a beautiful prayer of praise. This prayer is a testament to her deep faith and understanding of God's character. She began by exalting the Lord. "My heart rejoices in the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance." Hannah's prayer highlighted God's sovereignty, justice, and power. She acknowledged that God raises the humble and brings down the proud, that he feeds the hungry and makes the barren woman rejoice. Her words foreshadowed the way God would work through Samuel to guide Israel. This prayer is often compared to Mary's Magnificat in the New Testament, as both women praised God for his faithfulness and his ability to bring about miraculous change. Samuel grew up in the house of the Lord, under Eli's guidance. He became a prophet and one of the greatest leaders in Israel's history. Through him, God would anoint Israel's first kings, Saul and David. Hannah's faith not only brought about the birth of a son but also contributed to the spiritual renewal of Israel. Samuel's life and ministry were a direct result of his mother's prayer and dedication. Here are 4 important truths and lessons we need to learn from Hannah's story. 1. God hears our prayers. Like Hannah, we can pour out our hearts to God, trusting that he listens to every word. 2. Faith requires perseverance. Hannah endured years of sorrow and ridicule, yet she didn't give up on God. 3. Fulfill your commitments to God. Hannah kept her vow, even when it required great personal sacrifice. 4. Praise God in all circumstances. Hannah praised God before and after her prayer was answered, showing her deep trust in his goodness. Hannah's story is a beacon of hope for anyone struggling with unanswered prayers or difficult circumstances. Her unwavering faith, heartfelt prayer, and willingness to surrender everything to God demonstrate the power of trusting him completely. Through Hannah, we see that God is faithful and that his plans are far greater than we can imagine. Her son, Samuel, would go on to shape the future of Israel, showing that one person's faith can have a lasting impact on generations to come. As we reflect on Hannah's story, let it inspire us to approach God with honesty, persistence, and trust, knowing that he hears and answers in his perfect timing. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.